morning. One is in Genesis chapter 18, verses 1 to 14. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oak of Mamre as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them. Bowed down to the ground, he said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on. Since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant, who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where's your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent's entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." Reading from the New Testament, book of Luke, chapter 24, verses 28 to 35. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been known to them in the breaking of bread.
An older man in the church played the lottery every day. He had hopes he'd win the big jackpot. How many of you do that out there? Sure enough, one day he won millions of dollars. Since the man had a weak heart, his wife enlisted his pastor to break the news gently to her husband. The pastor did a wonderful job, and the man was fine. But he was so excited and happy, he said to the pastor, "I want to give half of my winnings to the church." With that, the pastor dropped dead of a seizure. You know, sometimes in truth, the cliche, "best to be careful of what you hope for," has a valid warning. The book Embracing the Historical Jesus shares the following thought on hope: hope as a spiritual practice, in light of Jesus' teaching through the parables. It says, the work of the parable is to dislodge hope from a future reality, not to make it a future reality, and then to place the future in the present as if it really has happened. bringing an alternative reality to life, then hope becomes a practice, not in the future, where hope for the future is converted into the present time. So on the morning of our service adventure to Camp Adams, my hope was alive and well. As I drove my adult self to Malala, my inner child was terribly afraid and unhappy. Of the one time I had gone off to camp, I kept remembering this. I had become so homesick the one time I went off to camp, I had to return after 2 days. And boy, was I nervous going to Camp Adams. Not all the hoping in the world of wanting to forget had worked after all these years. Now, as an adult, I rationally knew it was just a couple of hours away from my house. We weren't spending a week there. I'd be with people whom I'd known to love, and it was a beautiful day, and we had a lot of fun adventures planned. But my disastrous experience and the memory of Holiday Hills in 6th grade haunted me until after the service, when Jane and I took a walk towards the bridge to look for crawdads in the river. As we walked and we talked, a spot of red on the dirt walkway caught my eye. When I bent over, I realized it was a feather. As I picked it up, without really thinking clearly or looking at it carefully, I said, "Wow, Jane, I always hoped cardinals would make their way to Oregon." Jane looked at me dumbfounded and said, "No cardinals here. That is a dyed feather from a camp craft." So did I ever feel stupid? But in the split second for me, as I picked it up and I had looked at it, it was a cardinal feather, reminding me of my grandfather's Sicilian folklore, that when you see a cardinal's feather or a cardinal, it is a reminder of God's presence. My hope for my day at Camp Adams was to get through the day without thinking about the horrible camp experience in 6th grade. I hadn't actually hoped for a divine intervention, but there it was. In today's New Testament scripture reading, 2 disciples after Jesus' crucifixion have reached their destination in Emmaus. They encouraged the stranger that they had encountered on the way to come in and stay with them for the night and to eat with them. You know, I wonder what they had hoped for when they invited the stranger to their table, and I wonder what the stranger hoped for when he accepted their hospitality. When Pastor Parker told her friend Colleen her dream, she had hoped to get her dream dragon out of trouble. The story is told in the book Proverbs of Ashes that explores this spiritual question. In actuality, what really saves us? In actuality, in real life, what actually saves us? Her dream is situated by a lake in Seattle, and it's nighttime. Pastor Parker is standing in a grassy knoll, looking up at the sparkling stars and the moon. She's entranced all of a sudden by a spinning, swirling light, moving in the heavens. She wonders as it's getting nearer, is it a flying saucer? A spiral galaxy? It's multicolored with lights of sapphire blue, emerald green, ruby red, and molten yellow. It's not a saucer. It's a dragon plummeting to the ground. Its jewel-encrusted body is in a spin. Whiffs of smoke trail from its nostrils. Its fire has gone out, and that is why it's falling out of the sky. Diamond tears are spilling from her eyes. The dragon thuds to the earth. Pastor Parker moves close to it and bends down with concern, touching its tears. From out of nowhere, her friend Colleen arrives and takes charge of the moment, announcing, "We'll take the dragon home to my house." They carry the dragon to Colleen's house. As Pastor Parker wakes up from her dream, the last memory she has is of Colleen saying, "We need to feed the dragon chicken soup." The next day, in waking hours, she invites Colleen to come over and hear her dream. Pastor Parker shows her the picture of her dragon she had sketched and tells the story of the dragon losing its fire. Intrigued, Colleen asks if she can take the picture to the children's improvisational theater she directs. After seeing the picture and hearing the story, the kids want to make a play of it. The children staged the play in the sanctuary of Pastor Parker's church. As the congregation sat in darkness, the children laid out a pathway of lights down the center aisle. They danced a wild and crazy dance, banging drums, ringing bells, and whooping and leaping and twirling. The dragon makes her entrance from behind the high pulpit and comes to rest in the circle of the children. She had a great head made out of paper mache. When she landed, the fabric deflated into a heap on the floor. Then they offered the dragon chicken soup. But it wasn't enough. How can we help her, the children asked each other. Her heart must be broken. Look at all of her tears. The children touched the dragon's head gently. We must ask her to tell her story, and we must listen. The children nodded to one another. One child climbed inside the dragon as her head began to nod as if speaking. The children mimed listening. They shook their heads in sympathy. They touched their cheeks and hers in sadness. One by one, the listening children climbed inside. The dragon's body began to rise, billow, and fill. With all of them inside, her long body stretched the length of the aisle. Music filled the sanctuary, and the dragon began to dance. You know, through storytelling, listening, and drama, Pastor Parker's hope to get her dream dragon out of trouble is realized. So today I'm going to invite some of you from the congregation to tell their stories of divine interventions this summer. I wonder, how did you wander and wonder, and what were you more curious than afraid of?
Welcome to Bethel Congregational UCC. No matter where you are on your faith journey, you're welcome here.